We're recording.
Welcome. Thank you all so much for having me today. And we're going to talk about the Building Partnerships IEP and COVID. And as we go through this, just jump in and interrupt me if there's any questions that you might have, and we can kind of go from there. Just to tell you a little bit about Kentucky SPIN, it's Kentucky Special Parent Involvement Network. And we are defunded through the U.S. Department of Education under the federal law IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We're the Parent Training and Information Project for the state of Kentucky and have been since Kentucky first received one back in '88. And I think it's important to know what we don't do as much as what we do. We do not act as attorneys. We do not represent families. Our role is a peer support. We're all persons with disabilities and or parents or family members of persons with disabilities helping one another. And really to empower families, providing training and support and information, resources, and lending a listening ear and stepping through the process. We do a lot of trainings throughout the state, but we also work one-on-one helping families step through the process. And to tell you a little bit about myself is I am a sibling. Three of my siblings have disabilities from the seen to the unseen. And with those bring unique experiences, and they are smarter than I could wish to be. And I also am the proud foster adoptive mom to the greatest gift of my life. So today we're going to talk about some effective tips for partnership and communication with the school, preparing for the ARC or the IEP meeting, and then IEP and COVID. So we've kind of done sort of a mashup of different things, and especially right now as we're all kind of going through things and things seem to change daily. So we'll get started with the effective tips to build partnership and communication, because that is what is key to our children's success. Many people, sometimes when they hear the word advocate, they think it might have a negative tone to it, right? But that's not what being an advocate is. It is to speak up for someone to make things better. And also, it's when you are advocating, if you're using those positive partnership means, it is a good thing. And it is all children need an advocate, regardless if they have a disability or not. And it's very important that we all make sure that not only our children's voices are heard, but ours, because we do have great things to bring to the table. And really, if you've ever, I use the example in a lot when we're doing the self-advocacy, because I do think that self-advocacy is so important. Even if you speak up for yourself, I don't know if you all are like a deal shopper like I am or not, but even speaking up, if it's rung up wrong, it's supposed to be on sale. You're advocating for yourself. Of course, there are different levels of advocacy, but really looking at how we do the best and approach the best. And the bottom line is, you know your child better than anyone else. And your child, because we want our children to be huge self-advocates, they know their self best. And you know when something's working and not. And the ideas that you have, I think, is so critical. The things that you use at home, because I don't know about you all, but most things I've learned and with our family is we attempt it the wrong way first. We figure out how to adjust it and go on, right? Like it changes daily too. So, you know, those things, those ideas that you've come up with, those are so critical for you to share with the school, because you know what works best. And building, because we are going to be this is one of the reasons with Kentucky SPIN that our role is not to do it for you, but to help assist you as you do it and you advocate for your child, because you are who's going to be there. You know, they may have different teachers next year. It may be someone else from SPIN you talk to that helps out. So you are the person who is the constant in their life. And it's critical for you to make sure that your voice is heard and your input is brought to the table. I like to think of things, you know, in sort of some skills. What are the things? Understanding your child's disability, understanding maybe, you know, there's different things in all, regardless if it's the same disability, because I use the example, my brother Grant, he used a wheelchair and has cerebral palsy. Okay. Just because he has cerebral palsy and this works for him, someone else with cerebral palsy, it may not work at all. So, right, it's good to understand the disability, but with all of this, it to be individualized for each child and what helps best, because, you know, what works for one isn't going to necessarily work for the other. All children are different. And knowing the key players. Who are the people that are important, making the decisions, coming together, and really knowing your rights and responsibilities, so that you in your role are able to best advocate for your child. And becoming well organized. Now, this can mean different things to different people. Some people may not think I'm organized, which could be very true, but I could tell you what stack that information it is and where it is. So making sure you come up with a means to where you're able to keep track of things, but then also one of the things too that we always suggest is creating sort of an IEP binder, so that you keep track of all those things, because the record keeping is very important, so that you can go back and refer to that. It will help you to be a stronger advocate. And the effective communication. I don't know about you all, but the key to the partnership is being able to communicate. No matter what's going on, whether it be about our child at school, at work, in our personal lives, if there is not good communication, that can be the determining factor of things working out. And really being able to resolve disagreements, because we're going to have them. When we look at it as well as the partnership in having mutual respect for one another, because we do each play a critical role. And not that we're going to agree 100% of the time. We're not. But we do have to maintain that two-way communication, and it, you know, everybody has their role and responsibility, and respect one another, and really be able to separate ourselves, because I don't know about you all, but many times I tend to associate a situation with a person, right? So we have to be able to look at things to where, yes, this may have occurred, but we can't label them with that situation for the rest of their time, right? Especially those times when we don't agree on things. So we do have to keep that in mind, and it's very hard many times, because it's our family. And it is very hard to maintain that, especially when there are things that you do not feel has maybe went the best, or how do you work from this together? Now, when the key of all of it is, because our emotions are very high, not just ours as the families, but school, you know, the teachers, everybody is emotionally involved. You cannot help but be emotionally involved being in this, right? Because what I have learned is you do not go into this for the glory of it, right? Whether you're a teacher or other school staff, it's because you have a huge why. You may not know that about the other people, but I have found that we are a lot more common, and as we build those partnerships, you're going to see where people who are working in the different fields is because they have a huge why and their experience growing up that you may not have any idea about. And don't be afraid to ask questions. This is huge. So I am probably one of the most annoying people because I ask questions all the time. But I do that so that I can help my family best, or help other families unless I completely understand. Now, keep in mind, there is a way to ask things and not. So making sure that when we ask questions, that we are being respectful and that it's not in a, I'm going to get you, right? It is so that we all build an understanding. And I know it's harder for some people to speak up than not, but the more that we can ask questions, the better we all understand. And I will lay you money. What I have found many times, because I do ask all the questions, is that someone else is wondering the same thing that is sitting there, and you're also helping them, and you're building that partnership. So ask those questions, because if you don't understand, then you can't be your best. And active listening. This one can be hard. I don't know about you all, but because I always get worried I'm going to forget what I'm supposed to go over. So when someone else is talking, I'm trying to remember everything that I want to bring up in a meeting or when I'm doing different things. But I'm not really listening to them, actively listening to them, if I'm trying not to forget what I am. So we need to make sure that not only when we speak, but when we listen, that we're really taking that in and listening to what they say. And value and respect. This is huge. You can still disagree and have respect for one another. And that is what's going to be key to building the partnership. And it's so crucial because at the end of the day, partnerships and the good communication is what's going to make the difference. And being honest. I'm probably more honest than most people would like. I'm an open book. So, again, this is just like the asking questions. Be honest, but do it in a respectful way. Now, I will be the first one to tell you I've done many of these things wrong and have learned from experience. And allow everyone to discuss and to disagree with one another. So while holding that same respect for one another. And there are different cultural differences that everyone's going to have. So, and a lot of times too, when you're working, we try not to have judgments on others, but we're human, right? We automatically do. We automatically have bias about something. You're human. That happens, but we have to still, again, and the respect and value one another and focus on strengths. I don't know about you all, but the thing that I use every day in my life is I use my strengths to help with my weaknesses. Our children are the same. So yes, it's good to understand areas that we may need help in and struggle, but we've also, even more importantly, got to know our strengths because those are going to help us with our weaknesses. And be complimentary. Because a lot of times saying thank you will go a long way, because I have found, you all can give me some emojis there or raise your hand if this has ever happened to you. But most of the time, when I hear things from people, whether it be work, personal, it's always the negative first, right? Does that ever happen to you all? It is very rarely that I hear the positive first. Take those opportunities. I can tell you, so my son is, well, he's 16. He's in high school now. But anytime that he would, something that he talked to me about and he really enjoyed at school, I would bring it up like in the parent-teacher conferences and tell them, or when I saw them at school, especially, you know, when they're younger and stuff. But I'll tell you, in middle school, and this, they must not hear this at all, because I told them when we were having it, I said, he explained to me all about the science experiment you all did outside and all of this and why it came, and he just loved it. They never hear the good. And let them know, you know, it's not only what can you do for my child, what can I do for you? Look for those opportunities to build in where you can help, right? And not just when something's wrong, right? Because only communicating when something's wrong is not going to be effective at all. Taking those opportunities to be able to work with everyone, but also, and I'm as busy as the next person. It doesn't mean you have to be at school volunteering all the time, although anytime you can, that would be great. Ask them, is there anything I could help you with? Like, do you need help putting together worksheets for the family, sitting at home? You could staple them all. And so that helps the teacher some. Any way like that you could help, but then also compliment and let them know what they're doing good. Just like we want to hear that about our children, teachers in schools they want to hear that too, because they don't hear it enough. And verbal and nonverbal cues. This is huge. My mom says that I will never be a poker player because it's all over my face. So being conscious of, and sometimes people can read it wrong. Like they'll think my expression is bad, but I'm actually trying to figure stuff out, right? I'm processing. So being very aware of not just what you say, but how you act, because it does give a message. So if you're being sweet as pie and saying all nice things, but you're rolling your eyes at the same time, that's not going to be good. So you really got to watch all of those things as well. Some key tips, and we always recommend that it's important to put things in writing. It's important to have conversations with one another, but we all have a million things too that we're handling at the time. Following up with the person. Things to keep in mind for the written communication is focus on one or two things and be very clear in who, what, when, and where, right? And making sure that you set the stage so that it is very clear in it, just following up from a meeting. I know when I have different meetings, we can all leave and have a different idea of what just occurred. So I always suggest doing a follow-up. I just want to make sure, clarifying if there's something that, once you've left the meeting that you've thought about that you're not quite sure about, or did we really decide this or not? This allows you the opportunity to follow up. I want to make sure here too, and we'll pause in just a moment because I know we have several others that have joined us to see if there's any questions so far, but I want to make sure that, especially when we're talking about the IEP, an individual education program that our child has, that the ARC team, the Admissions and Release Committee meeting, and team is a lot of times, because we give it that additional name in Kentucky. So if you hear IEP team, ARC team, it's one and the same, right? So parent participation is critical and it's required. And having, because you have important things to bring. Now, it's required, but I also get the question, and the reason I want to make sure that I put this second bullet here is, because I get the question all the time, can an IEP meeting take place without me? Yes, if the school has tried multiple times to work to arrange the meeting and you're being able to participate. This is why it's so critical to respond. Even if the date or time they propose doesn't work, you've got to respond back, because it can take place without you if they have tried numerous times and been unsuccessful to get input or response from you to work out the best time. Now, we know that it's important in the decision-making and the development of the IEP. You know your child best. And you are going to help with identifying the strengths and the needs, because you're going to think of things and you see things that maybe others don't. In monitoring progress, you see how your child's doing. Are we going by leaps and bounds in this area, or have we not moved in this area? So your input is very critical. Now, when IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which Part B is the 3 through 21 that calls for the IEP for children in school. They had, when it was last reauthorized, they even put in alternate participation means for IEP meetings, which is wonderful. And now we even know now how beneficial it was to have that in there now that we're all living through COVID together, right? So knowing that there are different ways, because I know many times families may only get an hour lunch. That does not get them enough time to get from work to the school and back without being late for work. Well, you could do video conference calls or over the phone. So there are all kinds of ways. Work with them to move it to the time that best suits with your schedule as well. And really be creative with it, like we've had to be creative with, with IDEA. Another thing that's critical to know is ways to resolve disagreements. Now, these are formal processes that are part of your parental rights. But let me first mention, it is very critical to make sure that first talk with the teacher or talk with the therapist, whoever that you may have the disagreement with. Talk with them and try to work it out. If there's not resolved there, request an IEP meeting, the ARC meeting. You can request a meeting at any time. You'll at least have one annually, but you can request that at any time. You or teachers, anyone can. So handle it through the IEP meeting. Now, I also suggest, and I'm assuming most people on here would be from the Louisville area, but there may be some others as well. Now, if you have your request your meeting, right? And if there's no resolve there, then you also can look at having another IEP meeting with the head of special education or their appointee from the district present to chair the meeting, right? Then, and again, all of these things are suggestions. You want to go to the least amount of steps possible to get the resolve, right? So the formal processes that you will see here that you could take, mediation, that is one that you can request. Now, you and the school have to agree to go to mediation. No one's going to come in when they do mediation and fix the problem. If you all both don't agree to it, it's pointless. They're going to come in and help you all try to come to a mutually agreed upon resolve. Now, when you request that, or if the school requests that and you as the parent agrees to it, there is a form that will be filled out and sent to the Kentucky Department of Education. Now, someone will be appointed that is a impartial mediator that is not from your school district or surrounding area that will come in and mediate. They're there just to help, because sometimes we're also in the thick of things. It helps to have someone come from the outside to help come to an agreement, right? So this can be very useful, and it is a parental right. You also can file a state complaint with the Kentucky Department of Education, and you do have the right to appeal and due process. So those are things that are there, and it's important to know. But again, I would take the least amount of steps possible to get the resolve that you like, that you would need. Let me pause just for a moment to see if there's any questions that you all might have. And I can't see the chat, so if there are any questions there, if someone doesn't mind, because you all can put them in the chat as well, or take yourself off speaker.
I don't have any questions currently, and I'm not seeing any in the chat right now. I do want to mention that I love the tip about coming in with positivity and sharing the positives with the team, rather than, coming out with the punching gloves on, is a great tip.
Yeah, you will get much further that way. That don't mean you compromise what's important. But actually, a lot of times you're actually placing more of a priority on what's important when you come in that way. Sometimes we tend to want to look at it a little different than that, and it's hard. You know, it's easy for me to say these things, but when you're in the thick of it and it's your baby or your family, it can be very hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because many times when we plan these IEP meetings, it's because there's something going on. Sometimes it's not necessarily like the annual meeting, but it's you know, something has happened and we want to resolve it. So, but I do think that what's that expression about you get more bees with sweet or something like that? What is it?
You get more flies with honey.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's maybe the Rhonda version. I don't know. I've kind of mixed it up over the years.
But
So.
it totally does make sense. You know, sometimes we just need a reminder of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think all of us, no matter the role that you play in this, so it's not just that parents need it, teachers need it too, because we all, you know, in the thick of things. Well, and here we'll go through, and again, you all just interrupt me anytime. If you all have any questions or see anything in the chat. So preparing for the meeting. One of the things I think is critical because it's requesting prior to it any evaluation results, data, or items that is pre-prepared for you to get a copy of it so that you can review it and prepare. Because I don't know if you're like me, which you may not be, but I am a slow reader. I need time, and even if you're not a slow reader, when you get all of this stuff at one time, it can be overwhelming. You need the opportunity to work through it so that you have a clear understanding. And if there's areas that you have questions about, you'll be prepared and can bring those up. Another thing, too, that I always like to bring up, because the present levels that are developed for the academic achievement and functional performance, these are so critical because whatever's identified in this is going to guide the writing of the rest of the IEP. So if it is a concern or an area that you know your child needs, we need to make sure it's in the present levels of academic or a functional performance, because then we're going to ensure it's addressed further in the IEP. So I request asking, there's a lot, just like I did about the evaluation results that might be shared. There is a lot of legwork that is done prior to an IEP meeting. I would request because you have to look and develop a draft present level of performance prior to the meeting, right? So everybody has their input. So the school will have that. Request that draft so that you can see what are the things and where are they seeing it from their view, where your child is under the different areas of the present levels. Then you draft your own present levels of performance. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I do not know all of the right technical terms. You do not need to know that as a parent. You know where your child has, where there are some things that they may be struggling with and where their strengths are. You don't have to have the right terms. That's not what's important. You put it in your words and bring it to the group. You draft your own present levels. And you'll see it from, you know how your child's doing on different stuff. And if they are achieving different things that we've all have, what we have in the IEP. Also, make a list of the abilities, strengths, and what your child is doing and what your child can do now that maybe they couldn't at the last IEP meeting. Those are all things that are very critical, and you play an important role in that. But again, you don't have to know all the technical terms. You know where your child's at, put it in your own words, and create it. If it needs to be put in a fancier term, there are people there at that meeting that could put it there. And I don't know if y'all are like me, I don't care. And I hear this a lot too from many teachers and school staff is we all prefer stuff in just plain language, right? So they're probably going to appreciate you bringing it in your language because it's much more understandable. So also to make sure, and one of the things to always keep in mind before you go to an IEP meeting is if it's part of your child's program, it needs to be in writing in the IEP. My mom gave wonderful advice. Well, she always does. She, but she said anyone needs to be able to pick up your child's IEP with no prior knowledge to them and know and be able to read exactly what your child's program is and implement it. Right now, they may not be the specialist that would, but when you keep it in that lens, it's a whole other ballgame. So we need to make sure that it is very clear the who, what, when, and where, what's to be provided, so that everybody has a clear understanding. Also, too, if there is not already a designated spot in the IEP, always have things put in the conference summary. This is something that's very critical. A conference summary should give an accurate picture of what took place, not just the things we agreed on. Even if it's things that you all disagreed on or requests, things that are brought up, it needs to be in the conference summary. What I always recommend is prior to the IEP meeting ending is to have the conference summary read aloud in any area that is not in it that you feel is important and was part of the IEP. We need to make sure that that's in there because that's only going to help all of us better, right? We all have tons of things that we handle, and teachers, they have tons of children that they are working with. It needs to be very specific in what took place, what was decided. Even if we did not agree on it, this is what took place. So that is very key to keep in mind. Now, I'm bringing up transition planning, but I want to do this purposely, and this is part of, you may think, my child's not 14 or older yet. I've got a little one. Well, the reason I bring this up is it is never too.
Rhonda, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Please do.
Yes. So if we could go back to your previous slide, I wanted to add that I think it's a great idea to put that like in the summary or in the notes at the end of the meeting. And another suggestion that I've been given that I think is really good is to create an email that afternoon when you get home from your IEP and say something, dear IEP team, thank you for the meeting today. It was very productive. There was a lot of information that got tossed around, and here's what I understood that we decided on. And you can just bullet point the things that happened in the meeting in your understanding, send that off. And if they don't refute it, then you know that you're in the right understanding.
And I'm so grateful for you bringing that up because that goes back to that written communication and making sure everybody can leave the same meeting and have a different understanding of what took place. And that input, and that is such a wonderful tip. Just get in the habit of doing those every time, even if it's just to say thank you. You still are creating the opportunity to clarify.
And make sure you're not just sending that to the teacher, but you're sending it to everyone that was present at the meeting, that was on the team.
Absolutely. And then that way it only helps to build the partnership and relationship because it is not just, in many times, it seems to, it's the special education teacher and the parent, right? But there are so many others that play a role in it that need to be involved even outside of that meeting at the IEP meeting. And I think everyone will appreciate getting that because it will only help them better as well. So, and that is very key, to send it to everybody that was there as well. Thank you so much. Was there anything else, or
Let me see if there's anything in chat. No, there's not.
okay, thank you. So when we're looking at the transition, excuse me, talking with our children about their hopes and dreams, it is never too early to start with our children, because, you know, even, you may think I'm crazy, but even when they're little bitty, because you want to start building in that self-advocacy. Yes, it's going to be at different degrees. And looking at the skills that they're going to need. Now, there are things looking at this list. What should they know? What's going to be important? You want to build on them, right? So I always suggest, even starting now, know this though too, if they're older, they're 14 or older, and with their transition plan, it's important and they're to be there when appropriate for their IEP meetings. And it's important for them to be there to advocate for themselves. Now, when we're talking about this, start them when they're young. And I don't mean have them come in there and sit through the meeting. And also, let me say this, especially we want to make sure it's when it's appropriate, because if we are disagreeing and things may be heated, which we hope we are going to work to not have that, but that can happen. That is not an appropriate time for the child to be in there, because you want a unified front with the school, right? So we have to make sure that we're very careful, but it's important that they're there, right? And not only that, starting when they're little, or even if they're older and haven't been, and it could be overwhelming, have them come in the first time at a meeting and just say hi to everybody, right? And that's the part that they come in and do. Next time, maybe have them come in and show something that they're proud of to the group that they've worked on. Each time you add a little bit more, and you're instilling those self-advocacy things, so that not only are you doing these skills, but you all are as a unified front helping so that they're able to do it themselves, right? Now, it doesn't mean that we all of us can be independent at different degrees, but none of us are completely independent of resources, whether you have a disability or not. We all have areas that we get help on. But when we start as early as possible, making sure that we have those opportunities, I think it's very critical for our children, because they're going to grow up to be adults and they're going to be living in the same world. And we need to make sure that they have these skills so that they are able to advocate for themselves. Now, I have picked, we're going to go into the IEP and COVID. Now, I have pulled some based on information that I'm getting typically asked questions about and things that will come up. So I wanted us to really look at, we all know as we're going through COVID that none of us have all the answers. And when we think we might have it figured out, something changes the next day, right? None of us have lived through a pandemic before, and we're all adjusting as we go. It's no different whether you're a teacher, a parent, what role you play. But we can still work through this. And again, you always hear, think outside the box. Well, my whole life, our family, we've had to think outside of the box, because that's how we were able to do things, right? So what might work for a typical family doesn't work for our family. So we figure out our ways. It doesn't mean we still cannot do those things. I want to make sure that I point out recently, let me back up. We have been very grateful that the Kentucky Department of Education has issued so much guidance, not just specifically for students with disabilities, but overall, compared to a lot of other states. And one of the huge blessings has been, even if it was a document that was not specific for special education, they have always included special populations, which would also consider the special education, and they have been very deliberate in addressing that within different guidance. And that has been a huge blessing to help us all to kind of guide what we're doing, because none of us have been through this before. I did want to point out this guidance, and you're going to see, and I will make sure that I can't repost it. When I stop sharing my screen, I will put the link to back in there, since people have joined, the link to this PowerPoint, because you're going to notice, you see at the bottom, I've got it directly linked, and even on the picture too, to that guidance that you can access. And from these other slides too, you'll be able to see this big guidance document, and it's big. They compiled, because there's so much guidance that's been issued since this all hit last March. They've taken the critical guidance and put it into a big handbook, right? One of those, and the reason you'll see on the right, there is a complete section in there, guidance that considers for students with disabilities, and there are the areas that you will find within that document as well. It's a great resource to refer back to. Now, it's important that we talk about that idea, which calls for the IEP in school, Section 504 of the Civil Rights Law, and ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Education Act, and our state law, the Kentucky Administrative Regulation. Nothing has changed with that because we have the pandemic, right? Those are still the same. But it's important to know none of these set forth any guidance of what you do if you are going through a pandemic such as we are right now, right? Nobody prepared for that, because this is the first time that we've ever went through this, right? So know that the laws didn't change, but they also did not specifically provide guidance and instruction on what you do if this happens. Now, we know that many of the schools, and this, I always like to bring this up because there's a whole, and you'll see each one of these again, where I got this from, because it's important for you to know, not that Rhonda says this is what's supposed to be done. It's important for you to have the actual links to the guidance, because there is so much. We have sifted through and pulled important things for you to know. Now, here's the thing, which most of you know, is that each public school district can decide on what they're offering, right? And it can be a mixture as we're looking at the reopening, right? So it could be that you are offering your families, and this is not specific to disability, this is for all students, right? They could offer, which a lot of us have been in, especially when you're looking at Jefferson County, which I'm understanding the majority maybe that's on here, is that it has been strictly through NTI, the non-traditional instruction, or the virtual learning, right? But many districts, and also too, I'm about to share with you what was rolled out, because it is going to change even for Jefferson County, to where their options maybe, I'll give, the district that I live in, for my son, they actually have been on, they offer sort of this strategy 1, A and B group. They would have, you could choose to do strictly virtual. They give parents the option, or they can do the A-B rotating schedule, right? And we've had to flip back and forth, which you all know that too. Because of the outbreaks, it's got worse, then it had to switch back to total virtual. So I know that this is a hot mess I'm explaining, but with this, so right now, like the A group goes on Monday and Wednesdays, every other Friday, B group goes on Tuesday, Thursday, every other Friday, right now in my son's school district. Now, starting on March the 22nd, it's going to go back to all in person unless you chose virtual. That is going to be different for every school district right now. You cannot go by because it's not set by the state and everybody follows it. These are guidance on options that schools could do. Now, the reason it's important to know that is because choosing, if they offer the option of choosing, that does not mean you are deciding for them to receive their IEP services or not. That's a given. You're still to get that. It's by alternate means, though. So keep that in mind. Now, we all know coming effective for March the 29th, what has to take place based on this guidance that was released, what was the night? It's a Tuesday, right? I think we're Saturday now. All of my days are going crazy. But on March the 9th, this was released because changes to the non-traditional instruction, the NTI, or virtual learning. Everybody may call it something different, which makes things even more confusing. But if they're learning in a different location than school, they're at home. Now, starting March 29th, districts, and here's what's important, must provide each student with access to in-person instruction at least 40% of the week, meaning probably 2 days of the week. It also stated that the schools had to be open for in-person instruction, meaning 80% of the week, meaning 4 out of 5 days that they would have people in person. Now, when I say this, this does not mean, though, that your district might not still, which a lot are going to do, offer the virtual if the parent chooses strictly virtual, right? So it just said that all districts are going to have to at least do this and offer access to this. So again, it's going to depend on your individual choice of what you decide and do. Now, I want to, back March the 12th of last year, this was issued from the U.S. Department of Education. And when they talk about SEAs, that's your state education agency, Kentucky Department of Education. LEAs is your local public school district, which in Kentucky are your county or independent. For Louisville, it's Jefferson County Public School District. Now, this set forth that schools must ensure if school's going on, regardless if school's going on and they're all at home doing it virtually or in person, a child with an IEP, you still have to provide those services, supports to them. Now, if they're virtual, it may be through the alternate means. But if school is open, regardless of how it's open, you must do these. Now, a contingency plan is something that was stated that could be also developed by an IEP ARC team. And I think is very beneficial for many to have developed, because this is going to be, and I know that you may think, well, why would we do it now? We're already this far in, but it could be very beneficial because a contingency plan is what's going to occur, because we all know we have all thought we were in the clear, started back, and then had to pull back, right? So we still don't know if we're going to be in the clear, if there's going to be another roundup where everybody's got to go virtual again or not. A contingency plan is your who, what, when, where, and how. If this happens, we go to this virtual learning. And it may be beneficial, even if it's not that you switch back, if you need to have a plan in place now because you're doing the virtual and we don't have these specifics already stated, the who, what, when, and where, detailed plan, what happens, who provides it, everybody understands what the plan is, and there's the resources to provide it. Now, another thing too, that it does not matter how the instruction is provided, you still have to provide FAPE, which is free appropriate public education, for children with disabilities who have an IEP. Again, it may be through alternate means, but One of the things too is questions, and you'll see this is from a whole variety of different guidance documents that's been put out. And one of them was, are they obligated to provide FAPE in the least restricted environment, LRE? Yes, regardless of how they deliver it, you do have to ensure it to the greatest extent possible. Now, we're going to talk here in a second. There may be some areas that we're not able to be provided. Well, when we look at this, is we also want to keep in mind that, and I was very glad that this was addressed and brought up, because what is the role of the parent or family during virtual or distance learning? Parents are not responsible for providing FAPE to their children with a disability or expected to provide the specially designed instruction that typically is provided by a certified teacher or related service provider. That is not your role, and that is to be provided by that person. It should be looked at and provided if they are on virtual learning through video conference. So, or looking at how we provide that. It's not your responsibility as a parent to do that. You are not certified. You are not a provider. Yes, you may help as they are getting it from them, but it doesn't mean you are the person to provide it. That does not mean when you are in distance learning that your role also includes the role of everyone else on the team. And that's very important. Now, again, it also stated in the guidance that there were no changes to the laws because most people think, well, now that we have a pandemic, everything goes out the window. It doesn't, because nothing changed there. We just had to change the means that it's been provided. Now, before we dig into this commencatory education, I want to pause for a moment to see if there's any questions or any input that you all would like to bring up, because I know that this is a lot. You're on mute.
I was muted. Sorry. There are no questions at this time, but I am super interested in this part and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay, this is, and I've done quite a few slides on this because this is so critical for our children right now. So through the guidance, KDE back in July put out guidance about commencatory education and extended school year, ESY. And here's the thing that's important to know that I've got underlined down there. The goal of commencatory education services is to place the student in the position he or she would have otherwise been if had there not been a denial of FAPE. Now, let me put this in Rhonda terms, because this is how I understand things. So you all have to forgive me, but when you're talking about commencatory education, think of it this way. All of this is your child's IEP. Think of this, right, like what I'm doing with my hands, this. So your child may have received, we go halfway. There may be a whole other part that they did not receive due to the pandemic. No one's fault. Commencatory education is this gap in between these. So it's what did not be provided. It's what, that didn't sound right at all. It's what was not able to be provided, which results in a denial of FAPE, not at anybody's choice. But now what this means is, it doesn't mean that every child's going to qualify for this. But I do think if we're taking an accurate picture of this, that we are probably going to have more than we ever would have in any other situation that would have this. What's going to be important is it's going to have to be looked at individually by each IEP ARC team to decide this. Now, the thing that's important to know too is it's unfinished learning. And commencatory education, I think on the next slide, one of them on here, if I put it in here, is compensatory education may not necessarily, it wasn't in idea, it was actually through the court systems because there was a denial of faith, and compensatory education was awarded because they didn't get what they were supposed to get, right? For whatever reason. So it was a way to make amends for the denial of faith, which is under the federal law for the IEP. Now, what's going to happen here is people may be using different terms, but in other words, it's what they should have got that they didn't get. It's in the IEP, and it's going to vary. Now, it does not mean if your child receives those services and supports that's in their IEP virtually, then they're not going to qualify if they get them all. It's that gap between what they should have got that they didn't get because of it. Now, when we look to, this was so important in this guidance document, and I was so very grateful that it was put in this. Our teams can decide and come up with a remedy for compensatory education. This is key. We do not want to have to go to the courts to do this, because when you have to involve the courts, you're causing even longer time for a decision to come, and you are losing even more time for our children to receive the service. So in this guidance document, it stated that the ARC IEP team, which the parent is an equal member of, could decide that compensatory education needs to be provided and to what degree and determine it. Now, what's important too to know, and this has to do with ESY and compensatory education. If it is compensatory education or ESY that your child qualifies for, it is not to be provided during the normal school day, okay? This is in addition, because if you do it within the school day, you're causing more compensatory education because they are missing out on what they should be getting right then, right? So anytime these occur, it has to be outside of the normal school instruction day. It's in addition to, or you're defeating the purpose. So it can't be built into the school day because they're going to miss those critical hours, minutes that they are supposed to be receiving right then under, you know, for their curriculum, for their IEP. Now, when we look at this, it's going to have to be, again, a case-by-case basis, and I would review it and looking at and bring it up. Now, it could be determined several different ways of calculating it. And there's been a lot of questions and a lot that we're all still unsure about. And my hope is that there's going to be further guidance, even from the U.S. Department of Education, hopefully, that will come down, because it could be figured out. I'll think of the words here in a minute, but it is to get them to the position that they would have been had not the denial of faith occurred, right? It's not to get them further than another child or further them. Comp Ed is to get them to where they would have been had they received all of the services. Now, when we look at ESY, this is not to be confused with Comp Ed, because ESY, and again, I'm going to throw out Rhonda's terms, it helps me to understand stuff. Again, we're going to say Comp Ed, compensatory education, is what they should have got that they didn't get. Extended school year is to help them keep what they have, right? So it is designed instruction and related services that provide a student with a disability beyond the normal school year and at no cost to them, because many children recruit skills, especially children with disabilities. It's outside of the normal, right? All children lose some of their skills, like over summer break. But what's important here is, and I get asked the question, can a child qualify for compensatory education and ESY? Yeah, they're two totally different things. There can be children. Is it a given if they qualify for one, they will for the other? No, because it's two totally separate things. Now, when you're talking about the ESY, Extended School Year Services, this is not something new that came about with COVID. This is to be looked at in your annual IEP at least once a year. Is ESY services appropriate? And is it a concern? And really look at, is there a tendency for them to regress based on prior regression, their ability to recoup lost skills, progress towards their educational goals? Again, we don't want them to lose what they have. All children are going to lose a little. But this really is to help for children, and not all. I do get the question too, well, if they have this disability, they should, because that has regression. Well, it's not based on a category of disability that they qualify under or any of that. It's individualized for each child. It needs to be visited every year. And again, this is to help them not to gain new skills. This is to help them to maintain or cause less regression than would normally occur from what they've already learned. I love charts. This is from the guidance too. And I know, excuse me, I apologize for that. This is question, what it's not. Again, I love to know what things aren't as much as what they are. Compensatory education. Again, these charts are in that guidance. You can click right through on the PDF of the PowerPoint. Compensatory education isn't child care. It's not a continuation of the IEP. Also, ESY, it's not specific to the category of disability. Also keep in mind too, comp ed, it could be any category of disability. It depends on whether a denial of faith and to what extent did they not get what they were supposed to get. It's not an automatic that you qualify for ESY. And it's not a continuation again, just like comp ed's not a continuation. Again here, this is critical. When are they to be provided? It is not to be provided during the instructional day on either one of these. This is critical because if you do that, you're defeating the purpose. And eligible students, comp ed, when you look at the failure to provide faith, and that there may be situations if children hadn't been evaluated and identified for having an IEP due to COVID, that they maybe should have been earlier. So there are different things like that to take into consideration when you're looking at compensatory education, and it is going to be individualized for each child. Again, important things to remember here. It's a remedy for the denial of the faith and can be decided by, I can't stress enough, by the ARC IEP team. All of you all coming together can decide this and come up with a plan for this. And actually, that is ideal because we don't want time to keep elapsing, right? Because we know our children do best when they have the services as soon as possible. And it must be provided by the specialized teacher for that specially designed instruction and the appropriate related service provider. And when we look at the ESY, because I know we are getting close on time, and I know I packed in a lot of stuff here because I want to leave some time for questions. You know, maintaining a detailed log of things, not just with comp ed, but ESY is good too. Now, I'm going to skip just a few because I want to get to these tips because compensatory education, just like we talked about, you all going through and drafting out your own present levels, right? Take your child's IEP. Now, there may have been a couple of IEPs that have covered the time that your child was in school since COVID hit, right? Because you may have had your annual review. Get out any of the IEPs that during COVID, that which would have been last March it hit, right? Any of those IEPs that would have been in effect during this. Start looking at where were there areas that there might have been, and there may not be areas, but there may be some. That's how you're going to know when you're looking at what was provided and was there that gap of what was in their IEP, what was provided versus what they weren't able to provide. And again, having that decided by the ARC, you all draft out and look by going through those. That is going to help you, and then you request an IEP meeting to discuss that, especially if you feel that compensatory education may be something, and you know that some things were not able to be provided because it couldn't be in person. And again, if it was provided virtually, it was still provided. So that's not compensatory education. Now, even if you're not sure, have the conversations with them. Were there areas that are concerns? And is this, because we do need to take a case-by-case look at each child. Now, I want to make sure I cover this too, because this question gets asked a lot, and even prior to COVID, but now with COVID. Retention of students being held back. I want to make sure we go over this real quick before, so we have time for questions. IDEA does not require promotion or retention decisions. The federal law doesn't require that the ARC or IEP team make those decisions. It's not within those regulations that it requires that. Now, so think of this. Now I'm going to give you the picture of what Kentucky says, and then also share, and this is regardless of COVID or not, then also recent guidance that came out about COVID from KDE in regard to this. Now, it states in Kentucky administrative regulations, because remember the federal law didn't tell us and make those decisions for us. So in Kentucky administrative regulations, if a child's in primary school, which is kindergarten through third grade, it does state in those guidelines, in the Kentucky administrative regulation, that individual placement decisions for a child who are eligible for special education and related services shall be determined by the appropriate admissions and release committee pursuant with 707. So that does mean if they're the kindergarten through third grade, the ARC team can make that decision. Now, retention of students not in primary is, and that decision is left up to the superintendent or principal of the school, made by case-by-case decision, that responsibility is left up to the superintendent or the principal of the school. Used to, many years ago, they would hold kids back because they thought that was beneficial. All the research then showed that it wasn't beneficial, that we don't need to hold kids back. Now, so this is to show you what's in place, who makes it. Now, the decision, even at a minimum, for even if they're not in primary, you want to have the ARC team consulted in it. And you can ask for there to be a discussion of that. But I want you to know what was required by the ARC team based on the regulations and what wasn't. Now, KDE released on February the 28th a guidance document about promotion and retention. It stated, because when we're in COVID, it did state in it, placement decisions for children who are eligible for special education related services shall be determined by the appropriate admissions and release committee. Now, does that totally outweigh and change all the other guidelines or regulations? No, but due to COVID, and in this guidance, it is stating that the ARC team should not only be consulted, but looking at if this would be an appropriate decision for each individual child. So I wanted to make sure that you all were aware of that. Conversation questions as we wrap up here, things, especially when we're looking at COVID, things to consider preparing for a meeting, but then also as you're working with your teachers and the school staff, how are they doing? We have many students that may not have had behavior issues prior to COVID. Now there's behavior issues. We all are living through a pandemic. It has been trauma for everybody. So there are a lot of things. What are they struggling with? Are they able to manage the virtual platforms? Really looking at, and when we ask ourselves these questions, that's going to help us also bring things to the meeting to discuss too, because, you know, I always like to prepare and kind of get myself straight. And it helps me if I look, and again, it's what works best for you. But looking at these different things of how our children are doing, but then also supports for you. What are the barriers you're facing? What do you need supports with? And I know that this is probably the last thing that's been on your mind, taking care of yourself. That always seems to be the last thing that is on our list, right? And no more so now than ever. Making sure, because your schedule and your situation may be very different, having those conversations with them. And when the child is able to do the virtual learning, it may not be that during normal school hours. You may have more than one child. You may be working during that time. So making sure that you all have these conversations and having someone that is your go-to person at school. This is critical. As someone that you have built a relationship with and trust, not that you do not talk with the other people and other people that are important on the IEP team, but having a go-to person, it just helps things even better. That person you know, and you may not know who that is right now, and especially during COVID. And all of our children switched grades, or they may have even went from elementary to middle to high school during COVID. So it's hard to figure those things out through virtual, but that is going to really help you in advocating for your child, is having that steady go-to person. And there's no quick answer. That could be somebody different at different schools. It depends on how your school is set up and who you learn is the person that is best suited for that and individualized for your child. Now, we have tons of webinars every Tuesday and Thursday, Tuesday tips, and you all can go to our website. We do an e-news. We have a lot of video resources. We have COVID, along with all of the hard times COVID's brought us. It's brought us great blessings too. We have a video library full of tons of topics and are adding to them constantly on a variety of things related to persons, children, youth, parents and families of persons with disabilities. And we also have a COVID page that we keep the latest information. And you can sign up for our e-news. And then also you will have, and when I hop off, when I stop sharing, I'll make sure you have the link to this, but you can contact us at any time to help you. And if we're not the appropriate person, we will work to find that person for you. I know we're getting close on time, and I know Susan has some great information also to share with you. I'll stop sharing this, but I want to see, were there any questions before Susan jumps in?
Hey, it looks like Scott's here. I don't have any questions. I think, you know, that was very informative, and it looks like you put some of the links here. Susan, did you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm wondering, because what time is it? I think we've lost most of our viewers, or I don't think we had many. And I'm wondering if it's because we're close to lunchtime. Do you want me to just do my stuff later, or do we want to jump on into that right now?
Yeah, I think maybe what we'll do is just meet up again
Right.
And we can re-record some things for specifically for the Down syndrome families. But
Right.
Rhonda, I really appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank
And
you.
and that new COVID information is very informative and important because and I know it changes constantly.
Well, and I appreciate you all having us and I'm sorry I cut into your time, Susan.
No,
There's so much.
you had so much good stuff, and
Mhm.
so you were the main event here, so I think I can do my stuff later.
Okay.